Okay, students, shall we start? Yes.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. Because already it's 10:05. So last class we discussed about what is ecology, what do you mean by ecosystem, what are the different types of ecosystem, what is biodiversity and conservation of biodiversity. Okay. So before we start with the next, what do you say, the functions of ecosystem and the characteristics of ecosystem, we will just brush through what we have actually studied last class. Okay. So we will discuss again once more. So already we have learned what is ecology. You all know. Okay. Ecology is nothing but derived from a Greek word eikos, meaning house, and logos, meaning study. So ecology is nothing but the study of, you can say, the environment as and the relationship with the organisms. So therefore, it is nothing but the study of living space or the house. So house is nothing but the environment that we live in. And in more scientific way, ecology can be defined as the study of organisms, environment, and how actually uh, organisms interact with each other and also with the environment. And you all know actually the environment consists of both the biotic as well as the abiotic component. Biotic component includes all the living organisms, whereas abiotic component includes the non-living parts like temperature, humidity, light, rainfall, and all those things. So for the organisms, or you can say the earth to survive, both the living as well as the non-living parts are very, very important. So both together constitute, that is, a biotic component as well as abiotic component together constitute the ecology, together constitute the whole biosphere. So now the levels of ecological organization, last time already I have discussed. So you all know actually from the individual to the biosphere. So each and every characteristic feature of this ecology is very, very important. Individual is nothing but a basic unit, okay, of a study in ecology. So individual means it may be any living organism. It may be either an animal or a plant or a human being or whatever it is. So individual is the basic unit of study in ecology, and all these individuals together they make one population. So a group of individuals living, belonging to the same species, living at a particular place at a particular time, we call it as a population. And these populations constitute a community, and community will constitute what? An ecosystem. And all the ecosystems put together, like you have different types of ecosystems: natural ecosystem, artificial ecosystem, you can say, aquatic ecosystem, terrestrial ecosystem, forest ecosystem. All these together they form a biome. And the biome, all together, different types of biomes you have. So all together they constitute nothing but the whole universe. That is what we call it as nothing but the biosphere. So this is how last time already we have discussed. Okay. So that is an individual. Individual will make a population. Population will make a community. Community will form an ecosystem. And ecosystem will form a biome. And biome will form a biosphere. So all these are very, very important. So these are nothing but the different levels of the ecological organization. Now, already we have discussed ecosystem. There are two types of ecosystem. One is called as a terrestrial ecosystem, and the other one is a aquatic ecosystem. Terrestrial ecosystem are the ecosystems which are found only on the land. And here, examples you can give as rainforest ecosystem, deciduous forest ecosystem, grassland ecosystems. All they are, okay. All you can say in general, forest ecosystem, grassland ecosystem. You can talk about. So this is terrestrial, means only on the land, whereas aquatic ecosystems actually are found in the water bodies. Like you have oceans are there, rivers are there, lakes, wetlands, small ponds. So all these actually constitute nothing but the aquatic ecosystem. So basically speaking, there are two types of ecosystems. One is called as the terrestrial ecosystem, and the other one is the aquatic ecosystem. Now, other classification of ecosystem is also there, where we talk about the artificial as well as the natural. Now, natural is nothing but the terrestrial ecosystem, what we talk about, as well as aquatic ecosystems. But there are certain artificial, what do you say, the ecosystems that are made by man, like you have small pond impoundments, or you can say small wetlands, or even small lakes. They are constructed by the, what do you say, the human beings. So such ecosystems, they come under the artificial type. They come under the artificial type, like some any like a small forest, okay, for the reserve. To preserve the wild animals. So all these, so which are man-made, we call them as an artificial ecosystem. So we can also classify the ecosystem as the artificial as well as the the natural. Natural are, they are totally natural, whereas the artificial actually are man-made. So basically speaking, we can divide the ecosystem into two categories. One is terrestrial as well as the aquatic, and the other one is classification is the artificial ecosystem as well as a natural ecosystem. So all these together, that is the terrestrial ecosystem, aquatic ecosystem, what we are talking about, we can call them, we can consider them all under natural. But man-made ecosystems actually are called artificial ecosystems, like they are small wetlands, small ponds which are constructed by man, okay, and what is a small forest reserves. So such type of ecosystem, they are called as nothing but the artificial ecosystem. Okay. Now, biodiversity. Now, biodiversity is nothing but it is diversity is a variety of life forms which are actually present on the earth. So, enormous variety of life on the earth. It may be in the form of animals, plants, as well as what do you say, the even the abiotic what do you say, the component. So all put together, we call it as nothing but the biodiversity. But here, bio means with reference to life. So we can consider only the plants and animals. So diversity of life, that is enormous variety of life forms which are actually existing on the earth. Then we can call it as biodiversity. So it refers to all the species in one region or an ecosystem. So it refers to every living thing, including the plants, bacteria, animals, as well as the humans. So biodiversity includes only the biotic community, that is the plants, animals, as well as the human beings, along with the micro, organisms like bacteria, fungi, and all those things. So that is what is called as nothing but the biodiversity. Importance of biodiversity, you all know actually, because biodiversity plays a very, very important role. So economically, it provides humans with the raw materials and all those things which are actually essential for consumption and production. Then many livelihoods such as those farmers, fishermen, timber workers, they are dependent on biodiversity only. Then ecological support. So even biodiversity provides functioning of the ecosystem in the supplying of oxygen, clean air, water, and all those things. And recreational purpose also, it is very, very important. And cultural activities. So cultural activities like indigenous, here it cultural activities actually talks about nothing but the indigenous population and the tribes, which have strong connections and obligations of biodiversity arising from the spiritual beliefs, about the use of animals as well as the plants. So we use many of the plants, traditional plants, as well as the animals for our cultural purpose, which are used, for performing the rituals and all those things. So they say that even the biodiversity has got cultural importance. So in that way, we can say that biodiversity culturally also is very, very important. And lastly, scientific way means biodiversity represents a wealth of systematic ecological, data. So by which we can try to find out more and more, and we can do the research, and we can try to understand the nature. So these are various, the functions you can see, or the importance of the biodiversity, economic point of view, ecological point of view, recreation, cultural, as well as the scientific. So that is why biodiversity gains a lot of significance. It has a lot of importance. So that is why we need to conserve the biodiversity. Let's to biodiversity. So you all know actually humans we are very, very selfish. You all know. Okay, for want our selfish needs, to meet our selfish needs and all those things, what we're trying to do, we are trying to exploit the universe. So that means we're cutting down the forest for the timber and all those purpose, and also we're cutting killing the animals. So that is why we are actually trying to lose the biodiversity in that way. So there are many reasons which cause the threat to the biodiversity. So mainly human activities. So human activities have become so vast that for want of our selfish needs, for our needs, we are trying to cut down the forest. We are actually going for the wildlife trade, and also we are polluting. Totally we are polluting the environment. We are totally polluting the environment. In that way, what is happening is the wildlife, as well as even the some of the animals, as well as the plants, they are actually on the verge of extinction. So that is why these are the major threats to the biodiversity. The first and foremost is because of human activities. So because of human activities, what we are doing, we are trying to lose the habitat. We are trying to lose the habitat. And second one is we are trying to we are cutting down the forest. So deforestation, desertification means we are cutting down the deserts, we are cutting down the forest. So desertification and deforestation are also by human activities only it is. So that is why human activities plays a very major role for the threat to biodiversity. Then wildlife trade. Some animals and even some body parts of the animals are also traded to different countries for economic benefit. So in that way also we are trying to, give a threat to the biodiversity. And lastly, climate change. So because of all these things, when we are cutting down the forest, when we are cutting down, what do you say, the animals and all those things, what happens? Definitely there will be a change in the climate. So when the climate is changed, naturally what happens? There will be increase in the amount of CO in the air. So it will affect the physiological function of the plant as well as the species composition, and therefore will not be able to. So when you are cutting down the trees, what happens? Definitely you will not get the oxygen. If you don't get the oxygen, then it will be difficult for us to survive. So because you all know, we take in oxygen and give out carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide that is given out by us actually will be absorbed by the plants, and the plants actually will give you the fresh air in the form of oxygen. So this cycle will go on. So that is why what we are trying to do is we are trying to exploit the whole, the universe or the whole biodiversity. So that is why these are the major threats to the biodiversity. The next is result of biodiversity exploitation. You all know. So due to the over exploitation or due all these things of the biodiversity, different species of the plants as well as animals, they are facing a lot of threats. So that is the reason why different organizations have come up both at the national level as well as the international level. So at the international level, one union was found out that is called as the International Union for Conservation of Nature. And so what they have done is they have prepared one list that we call it as the IUCN Red List. IUCN stands for International Union for Conservation of Nature. So they have generated a list called as IUCN Red List, and this list actually includes all the names of the different plants as well as the animal species which are facing threats at present and also which need to be conserved. So they should be saved from being extinct. So that is the reason why the International Union for Conservation of Nature actually was found out. It was generated, and they try to actually go on for the. They have given a list of the plants as well as the animals which are on the verge of extinction and which has to be conserved. So this is how, because of this biodiversity exploitation only, actually this was called done. So you all know International Union for Conservation of Nature. It is IUCN, and actually it was founded by Julian Huxley on 5th October 1948. So soon after independence, this was actually founded by Julian Huxley, and it is an international organization, and it works on the conservation of nature and also the sustainable use of the natural resources. So the main role of this particular organization is to collect the data, gather the data, analyze the data, and go for the research and the project, and then also bring awareness among the people so that they will come to know what is actually happening, and what are the different animals as well as the plant species because of the over exploitation and all those things we have lost and which are also on the verge of extinction, how we can save them. Okay, so this is actually done by the International Union for Conservation of Nature. So they say that its headquarters actually are at Switzerland. So this particular organization actually has, after its generation, it has actually done a lot of work in the conservation of the plants as well as the animals. So the red list categories, like last time already I have discussed about this. So they have categorized, they have the plants as well as the animals and put them into three different categories. One is called as the extinct, means totally they are dead. No more species of that particular, organism is surviving. So they are totally extinct. Threatened means they are on the verge of extinction, and least concern means they are there, no doubt, but slowly they will also come to the they will become also threatened, and lastly they will also become extinct. So these are the three different categories that has actually mentioned by the IUCN, that is called as the red list categories. So extinct means already we have no So extinct, EX stands for extinct, and under threatened you have 5 different categories. That is, one is EW. EW is extinct in the wild. CR is critically endangered. EN is endangered. BU stands for vulnerable, and NT is nearly threatened. Means they are already threatened. That means they are not totally got extinct. They are not dead, but they are on the verge of extinction. So they all come under the threatened. And least concern actually our population are, they are stable enough, no doubt, but in the near future they are going to face the extinction. So this is what is called as nothing but the red list categories, which is given by IUCN. Yes, students, are you listening? Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello. Okay. Next is biodiversity conservation. Conservation is nothing but the protection as well as management of biodiversity to obtain the resources for sustainable development. So in one way, biodiversity conservation is nothing but sustainable development. So it is a development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations. So biodiversity conservation has got 3 main objectives. So they are what? To preserve the diversity of species, to see that the species whichever are on the verge of extinction should not get extinct. So they should be preserved, they should be conserved, and sustainable utilization of species and the ecosystem, and also to maintain the life supporting systems and also the essential ecological processes that are required for these species, both plant as well as the animal. So that is how we can go about with the biodiversity conservation. So with the keeping these 3 main objectives, the biodiversity conservation actually has been doing the job. One is to preserve the diversity of species. Second is to sustainable utilization of the species and ecosystem, and also to maintain the life supporting systems. So these are the 3 different, the objectives of the biodiversity conservation. So conservation methods broadly classified into 2 types. One is called in situ and the other one is called as ex situ. So biodiversity, so in situ is protected area network and ex situ. So what is we'll see. So in situ you have different types. So actually here the conservation which is being done in their own natural environment, then you say it is in situ. Ex situ is means outside their natural environment, then you call it as ex situ. So here in situ is national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, then biosphere reserves, sacred groves, sacred lakes, and all those things. So biosphere reserves again classified into terrestrial and marine. Now when you talk about extinct, there are botanical gardens, there are zoological gardens, aquaria, and all those things. Then you also have seed banks, then you have gene banks, then cryopreservation, then sacred plants as well as the home gardens. These all comes under the ex situ. So already we have discussed all these things. In situ is the conservation of species within their natural habitat. So in this method, the natural ecosystem is maintained as well as protected. It is maintained as well as protected. Here, the in situ has several advantages. Why? Because it is cost-effective, convenient method of conserving. Large number of living organisms actually can be conserved simultaneously because they live in their natural habitat. And since the organisms are in a natural ecosystem, they can evolve better and also adjust to various environmental conditions. And certain protected areas are national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, biosphere reserves are the examples for this in situ conservation. So wildlife sanctuaries already we have seen. See, these are the regions where only the wild animals are found. Only the wild animals actually are being there. So human activities such as timber, harvesting, cultivation, everything is there. So these are allowed as long as they do not harm or do not interfere with the conservation project. And also tourist visits are also allowed for recreational purpose, but as long as they do not harm or as long as they do not interfere with the conservation project. Example, Hastinapur Wildlife Sanctuary in Uttar Pradesh, Nandaur Wildlife Sanctuary in Uttarakhand. So like this, so many wildlife sanctuaries are there. So you can take out a list of these wildlife sanctuaries and you can give them as examples. So what are wildlife sanctuaries? You know, so these are nothing but the regions which are in which only the wild animals are being found. Next is what? Your national parks. National parks are the small reserves which is again maintained by the government, and here they are well demarcated and the human activities actually are prohibited. So they do not, because here the space is very, very less. So that is the reason why the humans are actually not allowed. They are totally prohibited. They cannot, enter into this, for grazing, forestry, habitat, as well as cultivation purposes. And examples are Kanha National Park. You can just have a look for recreational purposes, but not go for cutting down the forest or then going doing cultivation something or anything like that are prohibited. So totally they are totally prohibited. Only for recreational purpose they are allowed. So what are those? One is Kanha National Park in Madhya Pradesh, Bandipur National Park in Karnataka. So like this, we have a list of national parks. So number of national parks, a number of wildlife sanctuaries are there. You can list them and give the examples. Third one is biosphere reserves. Biosphere reserves are nothing but the multi-purpose protected areas where the wildlife, traditional lifestyle of the inhabitants, and domesticated plants and animals are protected here. So like tourist and research activities are also permitted over here. Examples are Nanda Devi, which is present in Uttarakhand, and Cold Desert, which is there in Himachal Pradesh. So this is about the three, what is that, in situ conservation, what do you say, the practices where, the strategies where the in situ conservation practices can be done. Now, ex situ conservation is nothing but here it involves the breeding and maintenance of the endangered species in artificial ecosystems. They are not in the natural habitat, but in the artificial ecosystems, such as in zoo parks, in nurseries, botanical gardens, gene banks, and all those things. So here what happens is very less number are there. So here there is less competition for food, water, and the space among the organisms. So here we have to supplement them, the food, water, and all those things. Supplement the food, water, and very less number of organisms are taken into consideration, because we have to see that there won't be any competition. If the less competition is there, then the organisms can survive much better, and also they can go for breeding, and the maintenance of endangered species also will become very, very easier. So that is why here ex situ conservation involves only the breeding and maintenance of endangered species in artificial ecosystem, and less competition for food is there, water and space, and it has the following advantages. Here, the animals are provided with longer time and breeding activity, so they can live for longer duration, and also they have the also they can go for longer breeding activity also, and the species bred in captivity can be reintroduced in the wild, and later on the genetic techniques can also be used for the preservation of the endangered species. So that is why this is actually what is a advantages when compared to the in situ conservation. But of course, when you talk about the cost and all those things, it is more when compared to that of the in situ. So here ex situ conservation strategies are botanical gardens, zoological gardens. So they are dedicated. Botanical garden means only collection, cultivation, preservation, and display of a number of plants, both the ornamental plants, natural plants, and all those things. Whereas in zoological gardens, we talk about the animals. So here you need to actually cultivate them, preserve them, collect them, cultivate them, preserve them, and you have to display them, okay, by their names, the botanical names as well as the zoological names. Now, a number of the botanical gardens and zoological gardens are there, like Himalayan Botanical Garden, which is there in Uttarakhand, then Nandarkanan Zoological Park, which is there in Ujjain. Likewise, so many botanical gardens and the zoological gardens are there throughout India. So you can name them. A list of them are there. So you can name. So this is about the botanical as well as the zoological gardens. Then you have the gene banks where you need to preserve the genetic material. So here what we do is we take in case of the plants, the process actually whatever the seeds or the genes of the plants are there, we are taking it and then we are trying to store it by in vitro method, by storing the freezing cuttings from the plant, or stocking the seeds in a seed bank. So either you can collect the seed, or you can preserve the cuttings from the plant and all those things and preserve it in the gene banks. So in case of animals, we can collect the sperms, we can collect the sperms as well as the eggs of the animals species, and then we can put them in the zoological freezers. So this is how actually, and whenever we want, we can actually collect them from the gene banks, and then we can use it for the research purpose. So this is with reference to the gene banks. Then next is sacred plants. Now, sacred plants are nothing but which are considered sacred and which are used for the religious purposes, like tulsi, holy basil, and all those things. So this also, in one way, we can collect them and we can try to preserve them, okay, since they are sacred as well as the religious. And home gardens, even at home, also we can create small gardens and we can do small farming by using different physical, social, and economic functions. And the area, because some of the what do you say, the families are having, I mean, big houses. So wherever you have, I mean, the place. So in that place surrounding your what do you say, the house, you can what do you say, do the farming, and you can grow the vegetables, you can grow the fruits and all those things. So in that way also you can try to I mean, collect, cultivate, as well as preserve the what do you say, the plants. So that is how you can go about with the home gardens. So other strategies for biodiversity conservation apart from this is all the varieties of food, timber, plants, livestock, microbes actually should be conserved. Okay, then all the economic important organisms also should be identified. They should be conserved. They should be named, and they should be preserved first. And the resources, whatever we are developing, okay, and we are utilizing them should be utilized efficiently. Then hunting of wild animals, poaching of wild animals should be prevented totally. It should be banned. The reserves and the protected areas should be developed, okay, carefully. The levels of pollutants should be reduced in the environment, because if the pollution ceases, then definitely it will not only what do you say, pollute the environment. So the even the organisms which are actually present in the environment, that is in the form of plants, animals, as well as we human beings, are also actually will be infected. So that is why the level of pollutants has to be reduced in the environment. Deforestation should be totally prohibited, and environmental laws should be followed strictly, and each and every person should be educated regarding the environmental rules and all those things, so that they can know, they should have that awareness, and then they should follow it strictly. So then only we can conserve the biodiversity. And the useful and the endangered species of plants and animals should also be conserved in the nature as well as in the artificial habitat. So public awareness should be created regarding the biodiversity. Then only the biodiversity can be conserved. So this is all we have got. Now, till here, already I have discussed in the last class the different, what do you say, the, okay, about the ecosystem. What are the functions of the ecosystem? What are the different characteristics of the ecosystem? In your syllabus, you have aquatic ecosystem. So what do you mean by aquatic ecosystem? What are the different types of aquatic system that we have to consider? Okay. So before going to that aquatic ecosystem, we will deal with the functions of the ecosystem. So what do you mean by energy flow? What do you mean by food web? What do you mean by food chain? So all these things are very, very important. What do you mean by succession? How actually there is an interaction between the organisms to that of the environment. So these are very, very important. So, hello, students. Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am.
Are you able to see the?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Now we will see. Now till now we have discussed in general about what do you mean by ecology, what do you mean by ecosystem, what do you mean by biodiversity. Okay. Then how to conserve the biodiversity, what are the different strategies to conserve the biodiversity. Okay. Now we will see first, when you talk about the ecosystem, what is an ecosystem, you know, what are the different types of ecosystem, you know, and what is the structure of the ecosystem. System. So all these are very, very important. So before going to that aquatic ecosystem and all those things, now we will, in general, we'll talk about first, basically, what is the structure of an ecosystem. Now you all know ecosystem, already we have defined ecosystem. It is nothing but it is a self-regulating group of biotic communities interacting, that is communities of species interacting with the non-living environment, exchanging the matter as well as the energy. So ecosystem is not just what do you say what is that interaction between the biotic as well as the abiotic component, but it is the interaction. Okay, it is the interaction between the biotic as well as the abiotic parts, exchanging the energy as well as the matter. Okay, so ecosystem, we can call it as a self-regulating group of biotic communities interacting with the non-living environment and in turn exchanging the energy as well as the matter. So because see, we are getting the energy from the non what do you say the biotic component. We are not getting the energy as such. Though we don't we are taking in the what do you say the plants. Okay, but plants from where do they get it? From the non-biotic component. So in one way we can say there is an interaction between the biotic as well as the non-biotic what do you say the component. So there is an exchange. Always there is an exchange of energy as well as the matter between the biotic as well as the abiotic component. So that is why in general we can say ecosystem, we can define it as it is an interaction between the biotic and abiotic component exchanging the energy as well as the matter. So this is what we can this is how we can define ecosystem. So ecosystem can be defined as a self-regulating group of biotic communities of species interacting with their non-living environment and exchanging the energy as well as matter. So such an ecosystem is called as ecology. We can call it as ecology, or the study of organisms in their natural home interacting with their surrounding. We can call it as ecology. Okay. So coming to the structure of an ecosystem. So what are the structural components of this ecosystem? What are the different components of this ecosystem? So in an ecosystem, you have two components. One is called as a biotic component and the other one you call it as abiotic component. Now, biotic component are the living forms and the abiotic component are the non-living forms. Now, when you talk about the biotic component constitutes all the living members of an ecosystem. Like you have plants are there, animals are there, as well as microorganisms. So basically, these are of three types. They are producers, consumers, and decomposers. So what are biotic components? Biotic components actually constitute all the living members of the ecosystem, like plants, animals, as well as the microorganisms. They are divided into three types. That is producers, consumers, and decomposers. What are producers? Producers, because plants produce the food. So that is why these are constituted mainly by the green plants. So green plants actually are the producers, because green plants, what do? They trap the solar energy, convert that solar energy potential and into potential energy in the process called as photosynthesis. And these species also known as photoautotrophs. So how do these plants actually synthesize the food? The plants synthesize their own food. So that is why we can also call them as autotrophs, because they synthesize the food. So we call them as a photoautotrophs, because what do they do doing? They are taking the light from the solar energy and then they are converting that solar energy into chemical energy through a process of called as photosynthesis. So that is why we can call them as autotrophs, or you can call them as photoautotrophs. So the producers are what? Producers are nothing but the green plants. We are calling them as photoautotrophs. We are calling them as autotrophs because they synthesize their own food. And how they are synthesizing their own food? They are trying to trap the energy, that is the solar energy directly from the sunlight, converting them into the potential energy through a process of photosynthesis. Okay. So that is how we get. So the producers are nothing but the plants. So the plant species which live inside the ocean waters, they prepare their food in the absence of sunlight by the oxidation of chemicals. Okay, and they are known as chemoautotrophs, and the process is called as chemosynthesis, like sulfur bacteria. See, okay, so here what they are talking is, okay, the plants which are terrestrial, directly they can trap the energy from the sunlight. But the plant species which are living in water, that is in the aquatic body, how do they do? They do not have sunlight. So what do? They actually prepare their food by the oxidation of chemicals which are actually present in the water. So hence they are called as nothing but by process called as chemosynthesis, because whatever the chemicals that are present in the water, they oxidize those chemicals and produce the the food or the energy. So that is what we call it as. That is why we call it as the chemosynthesis. So that is about the producers. Next is what? Consumers. Now consumers, organisms which get their food by feeding on other organisms. So we are consumers. Like, okay, so the consumers are the human beings as well as even the animals. So we depend on the plants for the food. Plants do not depend on anything. Plants synthesize their own food. That is why they are called autotrophs. But consumers depend on the plants for their food. So that is why we are called as consumers. Now these consumers are classified into three types depending upon the type of food they take in. They are herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, and detrivores. Now herbivores means they feed only on the plant species. They are primary producers. Example, rabbit, insects, and all those things. Then carnivores feed on both feed on herbivores and other carnivores. Example, frog, snake. Okay. Then omnivores, they feed on both the plants as well as the animals. Example, humans. And detrivores means they feed on parts of the dead organisms. Here, like waste of living organisms, etc. Examples, you can take it as earthworms, ants, and all those things. So they are called as the detrivores. So herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, and detrivores. So consumers are nothing but they depend upon the food on other organisms. So that is why they are called as consumers. They are classified into four types: herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, and detrivores. And last one is the decomposers. Now, the decomposers actually derive their food by breaking down the complex organic molecules, okay, to simple organic compounds and finally to inorganic nutrients. So, decomposers are nothing but they actually feed on the dead organic tissue, the dead tissue. So, here you have bacteria, microorganisms actually. So, what do the microorganisms do? They feed on the dead organic matter and they try to take the food, derive their food. So what do? They break up those complex organic form into the simple organic compound and finally to the inorganic nutrients, and then they take the food. So that is why they are called as decomposers. So examples for these are bacteria, fungi, and all those things. So this is about the biotic components. So the biotic components are what? Producers, consumers, and decomposers. Producers are the plants. Consumers are you can call as animals as well as the human beings. They are classified into four types: herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, and detrivores, depending upon the type of food they take in. And decomposers are they decompose a dead organic matter, like you have the bacteria as well as fungi. Now coming to abiotic component, they are the non-living forms. The abiotic component of an ecosystem consists of the non-living substances and factors. They are broadly divided into physical and chemical factors. Like physical factors include the temperature, like wind, air, soil, water availability, humidity, precipitation, light, etc. Chemical factors include the nutrients, like you have carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, potassium, pH of the soil, topography. All these come under the chemical factors. So you have abiotic components are nothing but the non-living component. Now this is all about what the structure of an ecosystem. So in an ecosystem, you should have the biotic as well as the abiotic component. Then only you can call it as a complete ecosystem. Without the biotic and abiotic component, or without the involvement of any one of them also, the ecosystem will not be complete. So that is how the structure of an ecosystem is made, or you can say it is made up of two components, biotic as well as abiotic component. Yes, are you listening? Yes, students, is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Next is what? Functions of ecosystem. Now, when the functions of ecosystem, here, the ecosystem has certain functions due to which the components remain and running together. See, without the activity, without any functioning, the ecosystem will not run. So that is why ecosystem to run, actually, they should have do certain phenomena. They should do certain activity. So what are the different functional activities of an ecosystem? What are the, or you can say the attributes of an ecosystem? So they are called as nothing but the food chain and food web, energy flow, ecological pyramid, ecological regulation, as well as ecological succession. So these are very, very important. So that means, see, we are saying ecosystem is what? We are saying it is nothing but a interaction between the biotic as well as abiotic component. So there should be some activity between the biotic as well as abiotic component. So without any activity, without any functional attribute, will the ecosystem run? It will not run. So that is why always there should be some functional activity between them to run the ecosystem. So these functional activities or the attributes are in the form of food chain and food web, energy flow, ecological pyramid, ecological regulation, as well as ecological succession. Now we'll see one by one. So what do you mean by food chain? Food chain is nothing but the transfer of food or the energy from the producers to a series of organisms with repeated eating and being eaten is known as nothing but a food chain. So here, Food chain is transfer of food, or you can say when you are taking in food, definitely you are actually transferring what? Energy. So the transfer of food or energy from the producers through a series of organisms with repeated eating and also being eaten is known as nothing but a food chain. For example, see here you have a grass. Now grass is actually eaten by what? Grasshopper. Grasshopper again in turn is being eaten by frog. Frog is eaten by a snake, and lastly snake is eaten by peacock. So like this, the cycle will go on. So here, what is happening here? You are transferring the food and at the same time energy. So transferring the transfer of the food or the energy from the producers through a series of what do you say the organisms with repeated eating as well as being eaten. You call it as nothing but a food chain. See here, that is another one example. So here, see how. So from the sun, what energy is being taken by this grass? Okay, so grass is the producer over here. So this grass is being eaten up by what? Grasshopper. Then grasshopper in turn is being eaten by a secondary consumer, which you call it as a rat or a shrew, whatever it is. Then you have a tertiary consumer, which is an owl. So like this. And lastly, after tertiary consumer, then you have got the decomposers. So like this, you have so energy, then producer, that is primary, first producer, primary producer. Then these consumers are classified into three, that is primary consumer, secondary consumer, and tertiary consumer. And lastly, you have the what is that decomposers. So that is how the cycle, or you can say the food chain, will go on. Now, basically speaking, there are two types of food chain. They are what? Grazing food chain and detritus food chain or detritus food chain. Now, grazing food chain is actually this type of food chain will start from the living green plants. It will start from the living green plants, goes to the grazing herbivores, and then to the carnivores, ecosystems with such type of food chain. So, like this. So, directly depend upon the influx of solar radiation. Most of the ecosystems in nature follow this type of food chain. So, how means here grazing food chain means actually they are this type of food chain starts from the living green plants. Living plant. So it will start from to the grazing herbivores. So say for example, grass. Grass is eaten by rabbit. Rabbit is eaten by a lion. So that means here the grass actually get the energy from what? Directly from the sunlight. No? So they directly depend upon the influx of solar radiation. That is why we call it as a grazing food chain. Now coming to the detritus food chain. Now this type of food chain goes from the dead organic matter. From the dead organic matter into microorganisms and then to organisms which feed on the detritus, that is decomposers, and then predators. So such ecosystems are not dependent on the direct solar energy. We can say actually in the grazing food chain, we depend totally on the direct food, solar radiation or the solar energy. But in detritus or the detritus food chain, here this type of food chain does not depend upon the solar energy. So here they are actually the food chain will start from the dead organic matter, dead microorganisms, and then to organisms which feed on the decomposers, and later on to the predators. So such ecosystems, they are totally not dependent on the solar energy. Now, example, bacteria and fungi. So bacteria and fungi, what do? They feed on dead organic matter, and then these are eaten up by small fish, which act as the prey to the larger fish or the birds. So dead and decaying organic matter here there. So dead and decaying matter are what? Nothing but they are the microorganisms in the form of bacteria as well as the fungi. Okay, then this is eaten by, so dead and decay matter is being eaten by the microorganisms. These microorganisms actually in turn are eaten by small fish, and these small fish are eaten by the big fish or the birds. So this is called as the detritus food chain or the detritus food chain. So in general, we can say there are two types of food chain. One is called as a grazing food chain, and the other one we call it as a detritus or detritus food chain. The grazing food chain do not depend, such type of food chain do not depend directly on the solar energy. Whereas detritus food chain, grazing food chain depends directly on the solar energy, whereas detritus food chain does not depend on the solar energy. Does not depend on the solar energy. So that is the reason why here detritus food chain basically it will be taken in the aquatic habitat. Why? Because see here in the aquatic habitat, definitely you have the organisms will be there, like bacteria, fungi, and all those things will be there, even if they are not there also. Like suppose on the terrestrial habitat also, if the decayed matter is there, so what happens is that decayed organic matter will be eaten up by the microorganisms. These microorganisms actually will be, when they happen to fall in the water body, then they will be eaten by the small fish, and this small fish will be taken up by the bigger fish, like that. So the cycle will go on. Go on. So that is what we call it as a detritus food chain. So basically, two types of food chains, grazing as well as detritus. Remember, grazing depends on direct solar energy, whereas detritus do not depend on direct solar energy. Okay. Now, then what is food web? Now, food web is nothing but a complex network of interconnected food chains of different trophic levels in a biotic community is called as a food web. So it is a network of food chain. It is a network of interconnected food chain of different trophic levels. Because here each energy level, you call it as a trophic level. Trophic level. So a complex network of interconnected food chains of different trophic levels in an ecosystem or in a community, you call it as a food web. So the complexity of any food web depends upon the diversity of organisms in that ecosystem. So that means each species of an ecosystem actually is kept under some sort of a natural check. So here, see here, this is, so a food web. This is called as a food web. Okay, food web in a grassland ecosystem with 5 possible food chains. So how it is? See here. See grass. Grass is eaten by a grasshopper. So this grasshopper actually can be taken by a lizard, or the grasshopper can be eaten by a hawk, like that. Or grass can be eaten by a rabbit. And again, it can be eaten by a hawk. Again, the grass can be taken by a mouse, that is rat. And rat can be eaten by a hawk. Or the rat can be eaten by a snake. So like this. So there is a complex, so interconnected. What do you say? It is an interconnected food chain, or a network of interconnected food chain of different species that come in an ecosystem are called as nothing but a food web. So the food webs. So significance of food chain and food web is, now they maintain an ecological balance by regulating the nutrient cycles. And second thing is biological magnification. So it is a process in which the concentration of the biodegradable material or any fertilizer which gets accumulated in the the environment will actually try to in the food chain. So as the humans actually we occupy the highest position in the trophic level, they get highly biomagnified, which is harmful. So example DDT, like dichloroethane as an insecticide. So here, now the difference between a food chain or significance of food chain and food web is, one is what they maintain the ecological balance by regulating the nutrient cycles. Second one is biological magnification. Biological magnification is what? It is nothing but a process in which the biodegradable material or the concentration of biodegradable material or any fertilizer which gets accumulated in the food chain, Now here, why they are saying is, since the animals, largest animals you can say, as well as the humans are the come under the highest position in the trophic level, so they will get infected. So they are more risk for this biomagnification. So biological magnification. So this is the what about the biological magnification. Next is what? So for killing the insects. So excess usage of these non-biodegradable chemicals makes the soil overnourished and its concentration increases as it passes along the food chain. So the smaller the food chain, the risk also will be very, very less. So that is why what do they say is, the complexity of the food chain should not be that much. Now, just now we have talked about food web. Food web is what? It is actually nothing but a network of interconnected food chains. So if the network of interconnected food chains are more, say for example, then who is going to suffer in the last? Nothing but the largest animals as well as your the human beings. Why? Because as the energy is being transferred, the food is being transferred from one organism to another organism. The animals as well as the human beings, which are situated at the highest trophic level, what happens is the energy that passes into them will get highly concentrated. Because why? Because the substances that are taken in the form of food will get biodegradable. They get biodegraded. So that is why they are more prone to infection. So that is a result of what we call it as biological the magnification or biomagnification. So that is why in one way we can say no doubt it helps you in the what do you say cycling phenomena, that is exchange of the energy as well as exchange of food between the different organisms, but to some extent also there will be a higher risk. So that is why as long as the environment is good, as long as your nature is good without any pollution and all those things, then there will not be any threat, there will not be any risk to the organisms which are sitting at the highest trophic level. So that is what is called. So here we can say that though the significance of food chain and food web, we can say they maintain the ecological balance, no doubt, by regulating the nutrient cycle, but at the same time, the biological magnification also what is very very harmful. So we have to look into that matter, see that the biological magnification should not be too much. If it is there, the organism sitting at the highest trophic level will be get infected, they will be more prone to get infected because it is very very harmful. Next is what about the energy flow. What do you now? Hello students, hello.
Yeah,
हाँ
ma'am.
मैडम. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, are you listening now? So these are, see, we
Yes,
have
yes.
talked about the components of ecosystem. After that, now we are talking about what? The functional attributes or the functional activities that actually run, okay, between the biotic as well as the abiotic community in the nature. So we know what is the food chain, you know what do you mean by food web. Now, what do you mean by energy flow? Now, energy flow is all ecosystems are energy driven complexes. So the energy concerned, okay, which is taken to the ecosystem in the form of light energy, chemical energy, or heat energy, as well as source of all these energy is what? Nothing but the solar energy. So this energy is gradually transferred to light. So chemical and heat energy will be falling. So because see how actually the energy is passing. First, the plants are taking the directly the solar energy, and from the and they are converting the solar energy into chemical energy. Okay, potential energy, that is what with the help of photosynthesis, and that energy we are getting it by taking in the plants in the form of food. So that is how we are taking. So the function of the solar energy by the plants and the use of this solar energy taken up by the plants obeys two laws of thermodynamics. So what are those? One is called as the first law and the second law. So energy can neither be created nor destroyed. So it can only be transferred from one form to another. What does the second law state? That every transformation of energy is accompanied by a simultaneous degradation of energy from concentrated form to the dispersed form. So flow of energy is always unidirectional. It is always unidirectional. So how the energy is flowing from one organism to the another organism? See, we are taking in the food chain. So food chain is nothing but it is actually the transfer of food or transfer of energy from one organism to another organism. Say from plants to the lower organisms, okay, the higher organisms, and lastly human beings, we can say. So that is how actually not only the food is being transferred, because when we take it food, definitely the food is being converted into energy. So we can say flow of food chain as define food chain as nothing but the flow of energy or the flow of food. Okay, so transfer of food or the transfer of energy. So this energy actually direct energy, that is the solar energy, is taken up by, you all know, plants. And these plants actually what do? They whatever the energy the sun's rays that are falling on the plants, they are used up for the photosynthesis, and then this is actually only the source of energy for the proper functioning of the ecosystem. So the fixation, so these plants what do? They will fix this solar energy and utilize the solar energy in the form of food by living organisms. Say the obey two laws of thermodynamics. Is the first of thermodynamic and second law, that what does they say is energy can either be created nor destroyed. So it can be only be transformed from one form to another form. Second is, it said every transformation of energy is accompanied by degradation. See, whatever the energy that we take in, don't take that 100% energy actually will be transformed from one organism to another organism. Some degradation of energy also will be there. Means some energy also will be lost. Okay, so from concentrated form, it may lead to the dispersed form. But the flow of energy is always unidirectional. So it will flow only in one direction. Okay. So then regarding the energy flow models also they have given. So the energy flow in various trophic levels of an ecosystem can be expressed by various models. That is universal energy flow model, single channel energy flow model, and double channel or Y energy flow model. So this is not required. You can just mention the energy flow models that is universal energy flow model, is what this model tells us, that energy flow takes place and there is a gradual loss of energy at every level as indicated by the picture. This occurs only mainly due to respiration, locomotion and other metabolic activities. Now, a single energy flow model is here. This flow of energy takes place in unidirectional manner through a single channel of producers to top carnivores, and they are illustrated gradual. There will be a gradual decline. Okay, then double channel or Y-shaped, here see. So in nature, both the grazing and deciduous food chains operate in the same ecosystem. So however, it is to the grazing food chain which predominates. So grazing food chain always which predominates. So here in the double channel or Y-shaped flow model of energy flow, it shows a passage of energy through two food chains. So here both the the food chains, both types of food chains actually are being involved. So that is what we call double channel or Y-shaped flow. Okay, so this is all about the the energy flow. Now coming to the ecological pyramids. Now till now we have talked about what? We have talked about the food chain, we have talked about the food web, we have talked about the energy flow. So in energy flow, what is energy flow you talk, and you can talk about only the two laws. So if you want, you can write about these different models also. Otherwise also you can just neglect. Okay. So now next is ecological pyramid. What do you mean by ecological pyramid? So here the graphical representation of the structure and the function of trophic levels of an ecosystem. Starting with the producers at the top and each successive trophic level forming the apex is known as an ecological pyramid. So here, so ecological pyramid is nothing but when you have a food chain. So that food chain, if you represent it in the form of a graph, and here every organism is considered to be one trophic level. So the graphical representation of the structure as well as the function of a trophic level of an ecosystem, starting with the producers at the top and each successive trophic level, that is organism forming the apex, you call it as nothing but ecological pyramid. So in a food chain, for example, starting from the producers to the consumers, there is a regular decrease in the properties. There is a regular, just now we have talked about no, because energy flow will be there, but at each trophic level, what is happening? Energy is being decreased. Whatever the energy that actually is being flowed, it will not be taken completely. So there will be some loss in the energy. So what they are saying, in a food chain starting from producers to consumers, there is a regular decrease in the energy, biomass, as well as the number of organisms also. So since some energy is lost in each trophic level, it becomes what? Progressively, it will become small at the top. It will become small at the top. So that is how actually you define an ecological pyramid. So ecological pyramid is nothing but a graphical representation of the structure and the function of a trophic level, starting with the producers at the top and each successive trophic level, okay, forming the apex in an ecological pyramid. So they have talked about three different types of ecological pyramid. They are pyramid of numbers, pyramid of energy, and pyramid of biomass. Why? Because what they are saying is in an energy flow, sorry, in a food chain, when the food is being taken up or eaten up, say we can say, or energy is being flow from the producers to the consumers, what happens? Not only the energy, but the biomass as well as the number of organisms also will be decreased. It will be decreased. So what happens actually when it is decreasing? Definitely some energy, since some energy is lost in each trophic level, it will become very small at the top. So based on these three categories, that is energy, biomass, as well as the number of organisms, since there is a loss, the ecological pyramid shows three different types, or it shows three different shapes, you can see. What are those? Pyramid of number, pyramid of energy, and pyramid of biomass. So what is that? We'll see now. Now, pyramid of number means it represents the number of individual organisms present in each trophic level. Pyramid of numbers will show it is only a graphical representation representing the number of individuals, individual organisms present in each trophic level. Example, grassland ecosystem. Now, in the grassland ecosystem, what happens? The producers are the grass. They are very small in size and they are very, very large in number. So hence what happens? They occupy the first trophic level because lot number of grass should be there. So very small, a small amount of grass will not be sufficient. So you have huge number of grass should be there. So that is, though they are small in size, but they are larger in number. Their larger quantity is more. So that is why they occupy what? They occupy the first trophic level. The next what? The primary consumers. What are primary consumers? They are nothing but the rats. They occupy the second trophic level. So these so what happens? Definitely the rats will be less in number than the grass. Rats will be less in number than the grass. Then you have what followed by secondary consumers. Secondary consumers are what? The snakes. The snakes again occupy what? The third trophic level. Again, they are very, very less when compared to the what do you say, the rats. So next is what? Tertiary consumers, which are eagles. They occupy the next trophic level. So this is the last trophic level. And so where the number and the size of the trophic level also is very, very least. So that is what this indicates a pyramid of number. Now, pyramid of number is, it actually represents the number of organisms that are present in each trophic level. Suppose the starting of the food chain is grass. So the grass is what, though they are small in size, but the quantity is more, the number is more. So when you have a large quantity of the grass, to eat that grass, who will come? Rats will come. So there may be 4 to 5 rats are there. So that means when compared to grass, the number of rats are also less. They are okay. So then they occupy the next trophic level. They are called as primary consumers. And in turn, these rats are eaten up by what? They are eaten up by the secondary consumers. Secondary consumers. So what are the secondary consumers? Again, the secondary consumers are nothing but your what do you say, the snakes are there. Okay, so the primary consumers are the rats. So then to eat the rats, what happens? The secondary consumers are nothing but the snakes. So when 4 to 5 rats are there, to eat those rats, 1 or 2 snakes may come. So that means the number is being lessened. And lastly, what? They are secondary consumers. The last is the third consumers. Tertiary consumers are what? They are eagles. So only 1 eagle may come to catch those snakes. So likewise, what is there here? What they mean to say here is the pyramid of number indicates, or it represents the number of organisms that are present at each trophic level. So the producers are more compared to the primary consumers, than secondary consumers, than tertiary consumers. So the figure will be different. So now we'll see the figure here. See here, this is the pyramid of number. So this is how, see, pyramid of number. So when you say the pyramid of number, producers are more in number, then followed by primary consumer, they are less, then secondary consumer, then followed by the tertiary consumer. So this is called pyramid of number. So if you say upright pyramid, like this it is. So partly upright pyramid of number. This is inverted pyramid of number. So if you see like this. So basically the pyramid of number will be like this. Okay. The next is what? Pyramid of energy. Now, pyramid of energy, it represents the amount of energy present in each trophic level. So the rate of energy flow and the productivity at each successive trophic level is shown in the figure below. So this is the pyramid of energy. Okay, so here production is, say, 10,000 calories. Primary consumer production 1,000 kilocalories. Secondary consumer 100 kilocalorie. Tertiary 10 kilocalorie. So that means at every trophic level, what is happening? We have seen now, not only the number is decreasing, but also the energy is also decreasing. The energy is also decreasing. So pyramid of energy represents the energy flow at each trophic level, and also the productivity, how much amount of energy is being produced. So at every successive trophic level, there is a heavy loss of energy, almost about 90%. So that is also pyramid of energy is given in the figure like this, like producers, primary consumer, secondary consumer, and tertiary consumer. Next is what? Pyramid of biomass. Now, it represents the total amount of biomass, or the weight of the biological material present in each trophic level. Weight of biomass. So considering the example of a forest ecosystem, there is a steady decrease in the biomass from the lower trophic level to the higher trophic level. So the producers are the trees, they contribute a major component. Contribute a major component of the biomass. The next trophic level is what? The next trophic level is the next trophic level. First is the forest. So here there is a steady decrease in the biomass from the lower trophic level to the higher trophic level. Producers are the trees. They contribute a major amount. Then the next is the herbivores. That is the insects and the birds. And then you have the carnivores. That is the snakes and foxes. And the topmost trophic level, very tertiary consumers like lions as well as the tigers, whose biomass is very, very low. So the pyramid of biomass is shown like this. So here the pyramid of biomass actually will take a reverse shape. it will take a reverse shape. So here, this is the pyramid of biomass in a terrestrial ecosystem, and this is a inverted pyramid in an aquatic ecosystem. So here, see, first is what? Producers. Always you have to start with producers. Okay, so producers, then you have the herbivores, then you have the primary consumers, and then you have the top consumers. But here we are talking with reference to the biomass. Biomass is not nothing but the total amount of biomass. That is the mass or weight of the material, mass or weight of the biological organism here. So whose weight is more? That is the top carnivore. Here the weight is more. So like that. So here upright pyramid of biomass in a terrestrial ecosystem. So here in this case, when we talk about inverted pyramid in aquatic ecosystem, now we talk about here the carnivores will take the topmost position. Then so here producers will be there, small insects and all those things, followed by herbivores and small fingerlings, and then larger fishes. So you can say smaller fishes and then larger fishes. This is in an aquatic ecosystem. When you talk about a terrestrial ecosystem, then you have a grass. Grass is eaten by the herbivores. That is what do you say, the deers, rabbits, and all those things. This is eaten by the primary consumers, and you have the top carnivores, primary carnivores, and the top carnivores. So this is about the pyramid of biomass. Okay. Now, in one way, what we can say is that the energy flow, okay, or you can say the energy. So at every trophic level, not only there is a decrease in the energy, but there is a decrease in the energy, there is a decrease in the number, and also there is a decrease in the biomass. There is a decrease in the biomass. So based on this, they have actually represented the what do you say, the trophic levels in the form of three pyramids. They are called as pyramid of number, pyramid of biomass, and pyramid of energy. Okay, so this is about the energy flow, okay, or flow of energy. The next is productivity. Now, what do we mean by productivity? Now, productivity is what? Ecological production, that is nothing but the rate of production of the organic matter or the biomass. So, the rate of production of the organic matter or the biomass in an ecosystem, you call it as the productivity. So, we have to see, so how much of biomass is being produced per unit time or per unit area. So basically speaking, there are two types of productivity. One is called primary productivity, and the other one is called as a secondary productivity. Primary productivity is defined as the rate at which the radiant energy is converted into organic substances by photosynthesis or chemosynthesis by the primary producers. So it is actually, so it is done by the plants, you all know. So primary productivity is basically done by plants. It is nothing but the rate at which the radiant energy, that is the energy which is actually being taken from directly from the sunlight, is being converted into organic substances through the process of chemosynthesis. Already I have told you, photosynthesis actually occurs in the terrestrial habitat, whereas chemosynthesis occurs in an aquatic habitat, where in the aquatic habitat you don't get the energy. I mean, direct sun rays will not be taken. So that is why whatever the chemical substances that are being present in the water will be actually degraded by the sulfur bacteria, and then it will be produced. So that is how energy is being converted. Whereas in case of photosynthesis, means in case of the terrestrial habitat, the primary productivity occurs through the photosynthesis. So that is why they have mentioned over here that primary productivity may be, I mean, produced either by the phenomenon of photosynthesis or by the chemosynthesis. So primary productivity actually is nothing but it is a rate at which the radiant energy, that is the energy directly from the sunlight, is being converted into organic form through the phenomena of photosynthesis or through the chemical synthesis by the primary producers. So what are primary producers? Primary producers are nothing but the plants. Now these are again of two types. They are gross primary productivity and net primary productivity. Now, gross primary productivity is also called as GPP, and the net primary productivity is NPP. Now, gross primary productivity is the rate at which the producers are able to utilize the radiant energy in the photo form or in the chemosynthesis form to produce their food is called as a GPP. Whereas net primary productivity, the rate at which the energy or the organic matter is stored in a producer after respiration, then you call it as NPP. So, remember that the difference between this GPP and NPP is here the rate at which the producers are able to utilize the radiant energy. Whereas in case of the NPP, it is the rate at which the organic matter or the energy is being stored. Okay, so that is the difference. So GPP and NPP. So primary productivity falls into two types. So thus NPP is what? GPP minus R. R is what? Nothing but the respiratory loss. Now next is the secondary productivity. Secondary productivity is the energy that is stored at a consumer level for use by the next trophic level is called as the secondary productivity or the secondary production. Primary productivity is only with reference to the primary producers. Those are basically plants, whereas secondary productivity actually is the energy which is stored at the consumer level for the use by the next trophic level organism. So that is called as nothing but the secondary productivity. Okay, so this is about the productivity, that is ecological productivity. So all these actually are nothing but the different ecological attributes or the different ecological functions that an ecological need to run for the running of the the whole atmosphere or the biosphere. Okay, the next is what? Ecosystem regulation. Now regulation is what? Nothing but the maintenance of an environment, means or balancing the environment or regulating the environment. So here ecosystem itself tries to resist to any environmental stress. It tries to disturb the normal ecosystem and maintain the equilibrium within the environment. So this property is called as homeostasis. Homeostasis means, see, because when there is an environment, definitely there will be some disturbance. So how the environment actually is trying to balance the the ecosystem, how it is trying to. So that is what we call it as nothing but the homeostasis. Homeostasis is nothing but maintaining the balance or maintaining the equilibrium. So there is always an equilibrium, always the nature, or you can say the environment, or you can say nature maintains this homeostatic balance between the biotic as well as the abiotic component. So that is how actually the whole the nature will run. So there is always a balance between the biotic as well as the abiotic component. Without the this regulation, then the ecosystem will not survive. So that is why always there should be a regulation of this ecosystem. There should be a balance between this ecosystem. So this system can show their tolerance or resistance only within a maximum and a minimum range. So which is known as a homeostatic plateau. So sometimes what happens, they try to actually give negative feedback. Sometimes a positive feedback will be there. So if any stress tries to cause a deviation, okay, if see, definitely every the component has to undergo a stress. Every component has to undergo a disturbance. So if it causes, so what happens is within this range. So sorry. So within this range, if any stress tries to cause a tolerance or tries to cause a deviation, then what happens? Then the system will has its own mechanism to counteract. So that is why what do they show? They show negative feedback mechanism. But sometimes what happens is these negative feedback mechanism, they try to bring the system back to its original position, to its original conditions. But if the stress is too high, if it is very, very too high, and it is beyond the limit, beyond the range of this homeostatic plateau, then what happens? The another type of mechanism known as the positive feedback mechanism will start. So it will start operating and accelerate the deviations. So always we have to see that to maintain the ecosystem, to regulate the ecosystem, okay, to maintain the balance within this ecosystem, always we need to know what is actually a negative feedback mechanism. What do you mean by positive feedback mechanism? So this negative feedback mechanism always there, of course, because see, whatever the disturbances, whatever the deviations that occur in a nature, okay, that nobody can help. So how best an individual, how best an organism try to survive it, try to actually overcome that stress, based on that actually you can decide. So you may go either, you may show negative feedback or you may show either the positive feedback based on the stress actually the deviation that particular organism is trying to come across at that particular period of time. So that is what we call it as the negative feedback as well as the positive feedback. So ecosystem always should be regulated. There should always be a balance between these two. So it can show a tolerance, it can show a resistance only up to a minimum or a maximum range. So that range we call it as homeostatic plateau. So beyond that, okay, what happens? You may go into either negative feedback or you may go into either the positive feedback. Okay. So this is about the ecosystem regulation. Next is what? Ecological succession. Any community tries to maintain the equilibrium with the prevailing condition of the environment. You all know. Okay, so it changes with the changing environmental conditions. Sometimes what happens is the activities within the community itself or the environmental changes can affect the change in the community. It will affect the change only to certain extent. You can survive. Any community will try to maintain it, but sometimes what happens is the activities within the community itself or the environmental changes can affect a change in the community. So directly the environmental change itself will cause a change in the community. So in that case, what happens? Ecological succession will take place. So the ecosystem development maybe it will take place. So here ecosystem will try to undergo a change. The whole, because of the climate change, the ecosystem itself will try to undergo a change. So that we call it as nothing but the ecosystem development or ecological succession. So ecosystem development may be defined as it is an orderly process of community development. Ecological succession or ecosystem development is what? An orderly process of community development that involves changes in the species structure of community processes. And finally, it will lead to or it will end in a stabilized ecosystem. It will end in a stabilized ecosystem. So what do you mean by ecological succession here? Just now we have seen that there is a, there should be always a balance. There should be always a homeostatic balance between the biotic as well as the abiotic community in the ecosystem. So if it deviates, then what happens? Either the negative feedback or either the positive feedback mechanism you need to undergo. But sometimes any community will try to maintain only up to a certain level. But sometimes the activities within the community itself, okay, try to bring a change, affect the change in the community. So what happens in that case? What happens? The ecosystem development will take place. So ecosystem development will take place. So ecosystem development is what? Nothing but the community development. It is a community development. So it is an orderly process of the community development, and it involves a series of changes that occurs in the community process. And finally, it will end up in a stabilized community. So the community which develops as initial community, we call it as a pioneer community. So when the community is developing, you have got different stages. So initial stage, we call it as a pioneer community, and the transitory communities, that is in between communities, we call it as the serial stages or developed stages. And the final community, we call it as a climax community. And the final community, we call it as climax. So when the community is trying to develop itself, then it undergoes a series of changes. So though it is in an orderly manner, they undergo different stages. The first stage or in the initial stage, you call it as initial community, you call it as a pioneer community. Then the transitory communities, in between communities, you call it as the serial stages or or developed stages. And the last community, the final community, you call it as a climax community. So the whole process, so this is actually called as ecological succession. So how actually a ecological community, how actually a community will develop, okay, by coming across through different stages. That is what we call it as nothing but an ecological succession. So it is also called as, so this ecological community to grow into stabilized ecosystem, it undergoes a process of succession. So this process of succession involves various stages. So what are those? We see now. So process of succession is, the whole process of succession is completed through a number of steps, sequential steps. Now they are what? Mutation, invasion, competition and coaction, reaction and stabilization. Reaction and stabilization. So you have different steps for an ecological succession or for a community to develop. Any community you may take, you may take a forest community, okay, you may take a aquatic community. Any community you take, for the community to develop, it undergoes different processes or different stages. So that is called as nothing but the ecological succession. So this ecological succession or the process of succession involves various stages. What are those? Nudation, invasion, competition and coaction, reaction and stabilization. Now nudation is what? This is nothing but development of a bare area without any form of life. So here there is actually no form of life, no living organism will there. Only a bare area will be there without any form of life will be there, and this area may develop due to topography, that is soil erosion by gravity or water or earthquake or whatever it is, or climatic regions because of floods, drought and all those things. Second is what? Invasion. This is a successful establishment of life in that area. Next stage, actually, in the first stage, there will not be any life form. In the second stage, slowly there will be establishment of the life form. And this life form, the species actually reaches this area from other places because of migration or because of dispersal. Okay. The next is what? Competition and coaction. So what happens here? They try to aggregate, try to invade that particular area, and they try to aggregate. Later on, when once they accumulate in large number, there will be a competition. So large individuals, after aggregation, what happens? Large number of individuals of the species will increase, and there will be a competition for food, for space, and everything, and also coaction will start. And the last is the next one is what? Reaction. Now, this is the most important in the process of succession, because here the mechanism of modification of environment through influence of living organisms. So here what happens at this particular stage, as a result of this process, there will be changing will take place in the soil structure, water, pH, and all those things. So due to all these things, the environment will get modified. So this particular stage you call it as a reaction. And the last one you call it as final stage, that is nothing but stabilization. Finally, there occurs a stage in this process, and this is the final community. And this final community, or the terminal community, it becomes more or less stabilized for a longer duration, and it will stay there for a longer period, and it can maintain itself on its own, maintaining the homeostatic balance with the environment as well as with the surrounding climate. So this is how the process of succession will take place. It undergoes 5 different stages, that is nudation, invasion, competition, reaction, as well as the stabilization. Now you have various examples of this ecological succession. Now if you take for example hydroseed, that is hydra. Now this type of succession actually starts in water. Just I have given you the examples of the aquatic habitat as well as the terrestrial habitat. Now if you take a hydroseed, so this succession actually starts in water first. So in this it starts in a water bodies, like any water body, aquatic habitat in the form of a pond or lake. So here what happens first, the initial what do you say, the community will be will be a forest. So it has following stages will be there. First, the phytoplanktons try to dominate. So these are the pioneer community here. The number of phytoplanktons like green algae, diatoms, bacteria will be involved. So in the hydroseed, that is in the aquatic community, which is also called as a hydra, the pioneer community is the phytoplankton community, which involves the microorganisms. The second one are the rooted submerged stage. Now here in this rooted submerged stage, here you have the small hydrophytes like hydrilla, elodia, and all those things. Next is the rooted stage. Apart from this hydrilla, elodia, you also have Nilambo, Trappa, and Azolla. Then after rooted summer stage, you have reed swamp stage. Here, the amphibious stage, which can live both on the plant as well as on the terrestrial. So the examples are the Sagittarius, Cirrus. These are nothing but the different, the plants which invade the ponds. Then you have the sedge meadow stage. Sedge meadow stage, actually here you have the cypress, carex plants, and they form a mat-like vegetation, and they try to cover the whole, the vegetation. That is why it is called as the sedge meadow stage. And then you have a woodland stage, which involves the trees as well as the small shrubs. And lastly, you have the forest. This is the climax community. And this climax community can be developed as tropical rainforest or as mixed forest, depending upon the climate of that particular region. So this is related with the, the hydrarch or the hydroseed. The next is what? The lithoseed, the community which starts on the rocks. Now, the community which starts on the, the aquatic habitat, it will end up in a forest stage. Starts from the, the aquatic habitat, that is from the water, that is pond, and it will end up in a forest. Whereas the second one, that is the lithoseed, which is also called as a xeroseed. It starts on a rock, so it can start with a bare rock, and it will culminate into a forest stage. And here different stages of this lithoseed includes crustacea lichen stage, then you have foliose lichen stage, moss stage, then you have the herb stage, shrub stage, and lastly the forest stage. So this is about the different, the stages of the, the lithoseed. So that is how the ecological succession will take place. Now coming to the biodiversity and conservation, already we have discussed about the biodiversity conservation already. So here biodiversity is nothing but the variety of life forms that occurs in the universe. Now, there are various levels of biodiversity, which has been classified into three different types: genetic diversity, species diversity, and ecosystem diversity. Now, genetic diversity means within the individual species, we have different varieties which actually differ at the genetic level. Like you have different rice varieties are there, tea good varieties are all there. Then species diversity talks about the diversity between different species and like apple, mango, wheat, grapes, and rice. Then animal species are plant species as well as animal species. Then ecosystem diversity is the diversity at an ecological level or the habitat. Like you have river ecosystem, then you have what do you say, river fish, aquatic insects, mussels, all those things. So, okay, so these are the different levels of biodiversity. Next is the values of biodiversity. When you talk about the values of biodiversity, here you have, they are classified into two types: direct value as well as indirect value. Now, direct value of biodiversity has two types: consumptive use value and the productive use value. Consumptive use value actually is the value which is placed on nature, okay, without passing through the market. Whereas the second one, like in the form of food, you have fuel, drugs, and medicines, and the productive use value. So here you get when you talk about the consumptive use value. So direct value of biodiversity is of two types: consumptive use value and productive use value. Means consumptive use value is which are used for consumption. Now consumption is in the form of, we get food in the form of fuel, in the form of drugs and medicines. Now productive use value, actually these are nothing but we get it in the form of products, and these products actually have got values like many industries which depend on these values, like in the form of textile industry, leather industry, silk industry, paper industry, and pulp industry. Now, the second value is the indirect value of biodiversity. Now, the biodiversity also provides benefits indirectly to the human beings in the form of social value, cultural value, then extensive and ethical value, optional value, and also aesthetic value. So the ecosystem services value are very, very important. So we need to conserve the ecosystem because ecosystem plays a very, very important role. It helps in the production of oxygen for the land-based plants and the marine algae, maintenance of freshwater quality, and the production and maintenance of the fertile soil also. So this. So next is also it will provide us the food in the form of fish, then also pastures for cattle, sheep, and timber. Then it also maintains the habitat. Then pollination of agricultural crops, forest is also in one way very, very important. And breakdown of pollutants by microorganisms in one way also is very, very important. So the ecosystem plays a very, very significant role, not only to the whole, what is it, the universe or the biosphere as such, but it also plays an important role in the maintaining the balance, also in maintaining regulation of the ecosystem. Now, threats of the biodiversity, you all know, any disturbance that occurs in a natural ecosystem will try to reduce its biodiversity. So therefore, the uh, waste that is being generated by the human population and the industrialization actually is spoiling the environment. So we need to decrease this and see that the diversity is not being decreased by this. So that is why always there is a loss, threat to the biodiversity because of the various human activities. So habitat loss will be there, then poaching of wildlife and also man-wildlife conflicts also will be there. So that is why we need to see that these threats do not occur to the biodiversity, and we have to try to conserve this biodiversity. So habitat loss, you all know how it is being done by desertification, by deforestation, by destruction of the wetland, and also we are trying to fragment the habitat, that is habitat fragmentation, and we are trying to exploit the different, what do you say, the plants as well as the animals for the raw material, and also for the production of drugs, and also we are trying to construct the dams in the forest areas coupled with the discharge of industrial effluents. So all these activities in one way trying to lose the habitat. So these activities need to be cut down. Next is what we are also poaching of wildlife. That means killing the animals for commercial and going for hunting for the sake of what do you say, for our own benefit. So even the poaching of wildlife has to be cut down. So Next is, so the factors that are influencing human population, only increased human population, so has led to actually the pressure on the forest reserves, leading to degradation of the wildlife. Then even commercial activities also have gone up. So all these had to be cut down. So the poaching of wildlife also has to be cut down to see that, because it is a threat to the biodiversity. So we should see that there should not be any habitat loss. Then the wildlife also should be conserved, and the wildlife conflicts also has to be cut down to maintain the biodiversity. You all know wildlife conflicts are nothing but they arise when the wildlife starts causing immense damage and danger to the man. So in that way, what happens such conditions? What do they do? It is very difficult for the forest department to officials to take care of. So in such cases, they try to actually kill the wild animals. So that also has to be taken care of. So the factors influencing the man-animal conflicts is shrinking the forest, then human encroachment into the forest, then injured animals, wild animals, all these things. So these has to be, what do you say, taken care of. Now next is what? Hotspots of biodiversity. Now this, I think the time is already over. Tomorrow we'll take about the hotspots of biodiversity. Hello students. Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Madam.
Yeah. Any doubt regarding today's class?
No, ma'am.
Yes.
No, ma'am.
Is it clear?
Yeah, ma'am, it's clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Clear, ma'am.
Okay. So tomorrow we'll start with the hotspots of biodiversity and the rest of the other chapter. Okay?
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay.
Ma'am, can you send this PPT now?
Yeah,
PPT
I told you, no,
PDF.
I'll send. I'll send.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.